Hey guys, today I'm coming to you to talk about how to overcome communication challenges. First, I want to say and a little apology for the crazy glare that's going on in my glasses. Um, Struggling to get the lighting right, so hopefully that doesn't distract you guys too much. Let me introduce myself if you haven't seen my other video. My name is Tiffany Christina Lewis. I'm an author, teacher, and a communication master. I've been working with children and mentoring adults for 17 years. I have 4 college degrees, 2 in early childhood education, 1 in business, and a master's degree in communication. Um, Communication is really, really, really my passion. I feel like it is the only way to um, interact with other humans in a way that is prosperous for your life. If you don't know how to communicate effectively, it creates huge barriers for you in anything you're trying to do. And this extends to not just strangers, but even your family and friends. I'm sure there's been many, many moments where you've been trying to just communicate with a family member and maybe that didn't go so well. I actually have a really good example of that coming up in my talk. So I do have some little notes over here. You should never go to a speech without notes. And I'm going to talk more about that as well because that's part of effectively communicating. So the first thing that I want to say is that if your communication is failing, you need to take responsibility for that. You cannot always, sometimes you can, but you can't always blame other people for your inability to communicate or to get your point across. Um, there's a few things about this. First of all, everything is a two-way street. Everything you were involved, I was involved, we were all involved. There's very few situations where only one person created all the conflict. So knowing that you're accountable is incredibly important when it comes to communication. That's the absolute first thing. You are accountable for the things you say, your body language, the things you do that may or may not make this conversation work. Do not be disillusioned. If you see it as your fault, quote unquote, because obviously, again, like I said, there's other people involved, then you can take steps to make your communication better or make the conversation or the communication better. If you don't believe it's your fault, that creates a barrier and you are not able to break through that until you realize whatever your part of the conflict or the miscommunication was. If you blame other people for the problem that is happening with the communication only, you will never communicate properly. Communicating, first of all, what I'm even going to talk about today is nothing. Like, I can't cram my whole degree into this discussion, but communication, what I am going to give you is like a basis idea of how to overcome your communication challenges. And this is really the first step, knowing what your faults are in communication, especially in specific situations. Some people also, another thing that I really want you to remember is that some people are not meant to communicate with you. That's frustrating because especially maybe in a situation where you're at work and you have a boss who is maybe disrespectful and you might try to speak to them with respect, but they don't reciprocate that to you. Sometimes there's nothing that you can do about that as long as you see your fault in whatever you're doing and try to learn to make yourself better from that fault. And if you are not blaming that person for the mix up in communication and you're really trying, you're using all your tools, then maybe you're just not destined to communicate with that person in a way that is productive. That is absolutely possible. So please don't forget that. When it comes to situations like that, you can't beat communication over the head. There's just nothing that you can do. But you have to try first. You have to do your best, see the fault in yourself, and do your best to try to manage those things in order to make a conversation work. And then again, you may find out that communication is just not for you. So let's go to a little explanation about why communication fails first. The first and most important thing is that we did not think about what we're going to say before we said something. There's a few different layers to my suggestions for communicating effectively. And one of them is planning, like actually knowing what you want to say, not a heat of the moment reaction, but actually thinking about the whole story, thinking about your part in that, thinking about the person that you're going to be speaking to, thinking about, is this a good time to speak? It's not just thinking about what you're going to say, but how you're going to say it, when you're going to say it. All of those question words apply to your communication. So the first way that we fail is just by not thinking before we start speaking to that person. And I'm not just talking about if you're mad from an argument. There's so many layers of appropriate communication, such as when you're in a meeting or when you're just being friendly, that can go wrong because you just said whatever the first thing was that came to your mind. The next and additionally very important thing is that we don't listen and learn from what other people are saying. If you have a person that you're trying to communicate with, let's just say maybe they're a love interest and you're trying to get to know them, you're trying to understand what they like. There's multiple situations where people have half listened or only are hearing what the person says, and they may misinterpret that because they didn't take in the full listening experience with that person. So actually listening, we're going to talk about that first. And learning from what you heard is incredibly important. Next, and this is my favorite because it's a very simple step that a lot of people miss. You don't always understand who you're talking to. Have you ever been about to have a conversation with someone and all of a sudden they just flare into anger or they just are very upset by what you said? A lot of times that's because you don't know them. Something you said triggered them, and you, of course, would never want to make them upset. However, because you went into this conversation not knowing really who you were dealing with, this is where the failure comes in, even though you had perfectly good intentions to have a normal conversation with someone, just because you don't really know them or how they would react. That's what happens. Lastly, and this again is something that's really, really overlooked by speakers, speakers being anyone having a conversation, is we don't plan what we're going to say. Again, I have my little notes here that I'm going over, and they're just bullets. I'm not reading my whole speech. I know obviously a lot about this, so it's easy for me to just kind of go off the cuff. However, I have a nice little outline here that's telling me what I want to make sure you are getting from my talk. If I just came in and did 40 minutes of communication talk, it could go in so many different directions. So having a plan on what you're going to say, especially when you're angry, more so. And this is where so many people do not plan. They literally just run into conversations with rage, and not okay. Not okay. This is a number one way to ruin a conversation. Plan what you're going to say. So let's talk about listening. Listening is a vital skill. And the first thing about listening that you have to know is that you're probably not. You're probably not listening. Even right now, you're probably not. You're probably looking at my beautiful plants in the background, or you're worried about the glare in my glasses, or wondering where I got my nice head wrap. And when you do things like that, you're not really listening. You are hearing what is being said, because it's literally going into your ears, but you're not actually listening. So the first thing that you need to do is look at the person who's talking to you. That adds another layer of it adds another layer of things to help your mind retain what is going on. It also gives you a chance to see the emotion on that person's face. If they're saying something that just seems plain, but they're crying, you wouldn't know that if you're looking on your phone or doing the dishes or anything like that. Because some people's voices don't show their emotion or show how they really feel, but their body language, their face, how they're holding themselves will show you that they're actually upset, or even that they're really happy. I think we've seen this a lot with phone conversations and text messaging. You can't see the emotion behind that. So if you're in a situation where you're talking to somebody face to face, you go ahead and give them that eye contact and that full attention to their body language. It's a really important part of understanding who you're talking to and what they want from you when you're listening. Again, put distractions aside. No cell phones, no TVs. If someone says that they want to talk to you, not everyone is like this. I'm a lot like this. If I want to talk to someone, I usually literally take them aside to talk to them, because I understand how bad distractions can be for communication. But not everyone is like that. So if someone approaches you and they want to talk, they may try to talk to you even though you are distracted. It's your responsibility to give them your attention if you intend to have a conversation with them. The other thing, the first thing, and even to this moment, someone could be doing this while they're watching my video. Do not try to think about what you're going to say before that person is done talking. That's considered a distraction. The thing about it is you're only multitasking is not real. You cannot listen, think, and have appropriate responses all at the same time. Some of us are really good at thinking that we can, and even having conversations where we do, but you never get the full context if you're thinking of your answer before the person finishes talking. A few things happen. One, your thought is irrelevant, because as people continue to talk, they add layers to the conversation. So maybe you thought of an answer to something that's not even important anymore. Also, you don't hear everything necessarily if you're kind of just thinking the whole time about what someone is saying. It's really important to just listen to everything. If that person's not willing to give you a few minutes after they're done talking to really think about what they said and formulate a response, that's not really fair to you. Understandably, some people might be like that, but it's okay for you to say, you know what, I just listened to everything you have to say. I just need a minute to figure out how I want to respond to you. What you're saying is important. And I didn't want to talk over you or think over you while you were speaking. And again, if a person doesn't like that, then we'll deal with that another time. Also, when we talked about distraction, but make sure you're not distracted by, you're not on the phone, you're not doing dishes, cool, you're not watching TV, awesome, but there's other people talking around you. Try to tune them out also. So many things. An airplane going overhead. I can't tell you how irritated I've been when I've been standing outside talking to someone and they just let a bird fly by and they're now more interested in the bird than they are in my conversation. So environmental factors. It's not like a TV that you can just turn off. And then lastly, again, we talk about body language. Look for tension. Do they seem like they're not relaxed? Is their face wrinkled? Are they squinting because they're just so... you can tell the basic emotions on someone. They're angry, they're sad, they're happy. But look for deeper stuff like fists that are clenched. Like if their arms are down, you may not be looking at that. You may be looking at their face. And if their fists are clenched, that's a sign of possibly anger, possibly tension. Some people do that because they're anxious. Look for feet tapping, look for the knee bouncing. Those kind of things are not on the face, but they say a lot about how a person feels. You guys do the same kind of things. You play with your hair, you bounce your knee, you chew your lip. Those are the kind of things you need to look for other people to be doing as well. So next, my favorite part and most important is to know your audience. That's what they call it technically. But when we say audience, we could mean even one person. Talking to a large group is something that I'm not even really covering, but you may be in a situation where you do need to know the whole group of people that you're talking to. And I guess that kind of comes into something like what I'm doing now. But before you plan a serious discussion, figure out who you're talking to. Some people we know well and others we don't know at all. This doesn't mean that you can't communicate with those people. People that you know, don't let that fool you. You could still potentially be miscommunicating with them. And again, it could come from your emotional reaction. It could come from just literally you not knowing how they would react. You should never assume that you know exactly how a person will react. And don't be ashamed to ask other people. Like, hey, I want to talk to mom about moving out. She's really wants me to live with her forever. She loves me so much, but I really want my space. Ask another sibling, ask your cousin, like, what do you think? You think mom's gonna freak out? Do you think that she's ready for me to go? How do you think, what do you think mom would do? Do you think she's gonna cry? Do you think that, there'll be lots of hugs? So feel free to include other people in, getting to know. I mean, people do it a lot, but they don't realize it. Like if you have a crush on someone, you might ask their friends about them. It's the same exact thing. Just knowing that person in order to figure out how they would react. And then that leads me to my favorite communication story. It always makes me laugh. Think about not only who they are, how they're going to respond to you. Like I said, is your mom going to cry when she hears that you want to move out? And how can you then soothe her so that you can move out and she can feel good about it? Are you moving out of town and you have to tell a friend? Think about how that friend is going to respond. Are they going to be super excited for you? Are they going to be sad and negative about the situation? Just think about it. At this point, you should know them because that's what you're supposed to do beforehand. Try to think about who they are. Now that you have that little bit, how are they going to react? How are they going to respond? My favorite story about this actually came before I started studying communication. I was living with family. One of my stepfathers didn't buy Christmas gifts. He preferred to take us shopping during the time that they were having sales. So that typically meant like the day after Christmas or the week after Christmas. He would take us all to the mall and he would just spoil us to death. So we didn't have anything to open for Christmas, but we looked forward to this shopping trip. Well, I had a stepbrother during this time and he was, oh gosh, maybe 12 or 13. It's been a while, but we're all sitting around thinking about what we want for Christmas. And he decides that he wants an iPhone. Now, back in the day, iPhones were not as expensive as they are now, but they were still a lot of money. It was still during that time where the plans were very expensive and there was no cheapy networks. My stepdad would have had to buy the phone, $600, $700, $800, and get it activated and put it on the cell phone plan and all this kind of stuff. I told my stepbrother right away, do not ask for that. He is not going to get that for you. Think of something else. And it wasn't because of the money. It was because I know my stepdad and I know how he's going to react, unlike my stepbrother. I'm just more intuitive, so to speak. I'm a little older, I'm a little wiser at this point. I'm already a mother. And I told him flat out, I said, don't ask for that. Think of something else. If you want to ask for that, go ahead, but be prepared that he's going to say no. Stubborn. This turned into the biggest fight of the holiday. He asked for the iPhone. My stepdad immediately told him no. Too expensive, put it on my phone plan, etc., etc. My stepbrother has not thought of an alternative gift. He's determined to get this iPhone. They are fighting tooth and nail about it. And eventually he didn't get anything. He was too stubborn to realize that he was not communicating effectively, that he wasn't showing my stepdad the value of having this item. That was the kicker. And that was something that I knew just from dealing with him. He didn't have a problem spending money for us, for food, water, shelter, toys, spoiled my daughter to death. However, if he didn't find the value in that item, like of course we need to eat, of course we need a roof over our head, and of course he wants to make my daughter happy, that's the value. There is no value in him getting my 12-year-old stepbrother a incredibly expensive phone. And it would have been his first cell phone on top of that. And so that was what was missing. Knowing what my stepdad found important and knowing how he would react to such a question. So that Christmas, I got a $400 camera because I understood that my stepdad appreciates value. And the way that I even got the camera that I got, because I was looking at, again, trying to figure out how he's going to respond. I'm looking at cheaper cameras. I'm looking at 250s. I'm looking at 275s. But because my stepdad was like, you're going to take pictures of my grandbaby with this camera, I want these pictures to be flawless. We ended up upgrading the camera at that point. I was about $200 short of an iPhone. And that's how it works. I knew when I told him what I wanted, how he would react, how he would find value in what I wanted for Christmas, and how I knew I would get it. So, long story short, you have to know how someone's going to react and how they feel about what you're going to say to them before you approach a conversation. Maybe you can get an iPhone or a fancy camera. So next, let's talk about planning out what you're going to say. So you are preparing to speak to someone. This is when you are initiating the contact. Sometimes people will come to you and you have to respond to them without any planning. But if you are the one who wants to take steps to make your communication better, if you want to be responsible for the way you communicate, when you have to speak to someone, even if it's semi-casual, even if it's important, you want to make a plan. So the way that I typically plan, I'll use anger as an example. I've had many, many situations where I was angry, specifically at work. I work with kids. So working with kids and supervising adults who work with kids, there's a lot of things to be angry about. I don't know if you guys really It's like, I can make it a little clear. There's like layers of things. making sure kids get a firm education, making sure that there's finances for the food that we provide and the learning supplies that we provide, making sure that vendors that we work with are doing what they need to do for the children. If we are getting toilet paper delivered or hand soap or something like that, how important it is for that vendor to bring enough of it, and etc. So I've been in a lot of situations in my life or in my career, where maybe a vendor came to my school and they did not bring enough soap. And maybe this has been happening over and over and over again. And I am tired of this delivery man. He is giving me such a pain. Not having soap technically means our school could be closed. It means that I have to pay the vendor and I have to go to the store and get soap for my kids. It's not fair in any kind of way. And after I've asked so nicely every single time, please make sure that you have the stock when you get here. And I'm being very clear, and I'm emailing, and I'm reminding people, and I'm calling before this guy shows up to make sure. And I'm still getting unsatisfactory service. Now I'm actually mad because I've done so many things to try to make sure these transactions go right. So what I do is I am raging from the bathroom back to my desk. And while I'm doing that, I'm thinking of every single mean thing that I want to say to this person. I'm thinking about how I'm going to cancel our vending service. I'm so tired. I'm thinking of speaking to your supervisor because I want you fired. I'm thinking of changing how we get the soap and how we get, and I'm letting that happen. I am fully embracing my anger. I'm not acting like I'm not angry. I am ranting, I am raving, and then I'm writing out everything down that I said or that I thought during that time. I'm literally writing down, I want to change my sanitary product vendor. Under that, I'm writing why I want to do this. Because for me, this is a work situation. I have to actually speak to my owner about changing the vendor. I can't just jump up and say, you're fired, I'm not dealing with you anymore. So I have to have a really concrete reason and explanation for why. And in this case, it was actually really simple, but if I want to change vendor, which is what my communication is, this is me telling someone that I want to change vendor. I'm either telling my owner or I'm telling my vendor. I'm threatening them, basically. And I am compiling all of these reasons why I am ready to change my vendor. And this came, again, from my anger. This didn't come from a place of logic. I'm literally just storming from the bathroom to my desk in my mind. Some things I'm saying out loud because I'm so furious, and my assistant director, my business manager are there, and of course they're also upset because we're trying to run a school and we're all so used to the negative relationship that we're having with the vendor that when I come out of the bathroom and I'm screaming about the soap, they know why. But when it is time for me to reach out to that vendor or to my owner, I have to be professional. I'm taking the anger that I have about that situation, and I'm probably taking a day or two to create what I want to say, to plan how I'm going to deal with everything. And that includes who I want to talk to, how I want to talk to them. And we're going to get more into right place, right time in a moment. But using that strong energy that you have when something first happens, even if it's like extreme happiness and you want to thank somebody, or frustration over a situation, use that not to create a negative communication response, but to, your brain is like sending out so many very good things at that time. It's just not your body is not reacting in an appropriate way for communication. Your mind is right. It's saying this is not okay, this is not okay, this is not okay, and that anger is completely normal. But when it's time to communicate, you can't go in with that raw caveman energy. Um, oh, I got 10 minutes. There's nothing wrong with writing down what you want to say. Please do not think that you're weird or you're a nerd. I do that. I want more people to be doing that, because when I communicate with people, I wish they would write down what they were trying to say to me or what they wanted. You forget things. And B, sometimes when you write stuff down or when you think and plan out what you're going to say, you actually realize that you don't have anything to say. Once you've had time to think and get everything ready, you might decide that it's not worth pursuing. You might decide that what you're saying is actually invalid. This goes back to making sure that you understand you're responsible for your communication. Once you get that plan on paper and you're kind of writing down bullets on what you want to say to that person, all of a sudden you might see that, oh, I don't need to say that. That's my fault. I didn't follow through with this, or I didn't do what I was supposed to do in this case. So that will help you kind of tighten up what you want to say. And again, when you're upset, use that raw brain power to plan what you're going to do, not to actually confront people. We never want to confront people when we're upset or angry. And of course, you may be in a situation where you have to do that. But my number one tip for those kind of conversations is to calm down. The person who is the most calm, let me break from what I'm saying, because right now we're talking about planning, but I do want to say very, very quickly, if you are in a situation where you're in a confrontation with someone, you want to be the least angry. You want to be the least angry person in that conversation. That's very important. The person who's the most angry is not thinking clearly. Again, your brain is very powerful during that time, but it's not coherent. It's just a blah of all kinds of things happening at one time. People are thinking about old things that were done to them. People are thinking about, so many things that maybe aren't even related to what's going on. And it's not until later that they realize how wrong they were during that time. So if you get in a situation where you're immediately thrust into a conflict that is heated, you want to be the most calm person. I cannot say that enough. Take some deep breaths, pace. A lot of times people just need to kind of walk around, release your shoulders, relax your face, and just try to calm down as much as you can. You will always be on top of that conversation if you are calm. Even if you don't have anything great to say, you'll be listening, you'll be understanding, and you will get more from an angry conversation than anyone else involved. So back to planning. Make sure, again, that you also consider who you're talking to and how they're going to respond in your plan. So let's go back to the example of moving out of mommy's house. We know that mom will probably cry when we tell her that we're moving. We know that she's going to try to talk us out of it. I don't want you to leave. The world is so cold. How are you going to survive? What about me and dad? We're going to be so lonely without you. You got to be ready for those. You got to tell mom, look, I know the world is cold, but you've raised me so well, and I'm ready for anything. And I know that you will support me if I need any help. I'm always going to be coming home for all these multiple holidays, and you and dad aren't going to be, you guys will be fine. You guys will love the freedom. You can turn my room into an office, or you can turn my room into a man cave, whatever you want, but you just have to be ready for what mom is going to say, and go ahead and take a note of that. If mom asks me about finances, I'll let her know that I'm going to be trying to get a raise at the same time as I'm looking for a place to move. Or if mom is worried about my safety, I'll let her know that I'm getting a dog. just try to kind of figure out what that person might say in rebuttal, and just get ready for that. You might find that mom just says, okay, fine, get out, because I want to turn your room into an office. And then, cool. But you had a plan just in case. Don't go in and find out that mom is concerned about your safety, because that's more likely than her wanting to turn your room into an office. So always be prepared. Think about who you're talking to, think about how they're going to react, and prepare for all of those things. Lastly, I just want to talk about picking the right time and place for your communication. This is a very, very neglected part of communication, and it is literally part of communication. Being effective and overcoming those challenges in communication, one major challenge in communication is trying to talk to somebody when they're not ready. That means you picked the wrong time. Or trying to talk to somebody about something private in a very public place. That could turn into an argument, which you have to be very calm for. But understandably, you're just ready to have this communication. You are so tired of the conflicts you're having with this person, and you're just like, look, I need to talk to you, but not in the middle of Times Square, not in the middle of church. It's just not a good time. Plan a private meeting if that's safe. Just say, hey, I want to talk to you. Can you come by my house? Or can I meet you at the park? Of course, you want to stay away from those distractions. So if the park is really busy, maybe pick another place or find a quiet area. But yeah, just plan a meeting, throw a meeting out there. I have I've had multiple situations where a teacher has come up to my desk, and my desk was right in the middle of the entry to the school. So people could walk by and see me there, like I'm kind of like the principal. And I would have a teacher just come up to my desk and start ranting and raving about something, anything. I don't know. I didn't get my break, or this parent was rude to me. And we can't talk here. This is not a good place. There's people coming in to bring their children. You're addressing people by name so they could easily hear your communication. This is just not a good place. We also, in my home, we run a few businesses. And so every week we have a pre-planned meeting. Sometimes we miss it, and sometimes I just have to call a meeting. Even for my family, like, hey guys, we need to have a family meeting. Sometimes just telling my daughter to do her chores as she's running by me is not a good time. It's not a good place. She's not retaining the information. She's not really listening to me. She's trying to hurry up and get to whatever she's doing. So make sure that you pick the right time and place. Plan a private meeting. Or if you need to speak with a group, like maybe your friend group, plan a meeting with them. Hey, when can you come? Because that's another thing. And I didn't get a chance to really talk about that. But if you do need to speak in a small group, 3 or 4 people, maybe you guys are planning a trip, or there's some conflicts going on in the group that you want to address, work with all of their schedules. Do not have a meeting without everyone being present. You don't want to be telling everybody the same thing that we already discussed. But this is a good time to plan a private meeting. Avoid distracting times or places. Like if you know your mom watches her soap operas or her game shows at 11, it's not really a good time for you to tell her that you're moving out. That could actually make her even more upset, because now you're interrupting her show. Also, don't pick places that are distracting. Like I said, if you're going to meet at a park, make sure you go to an area where there's very few people, some place where you could potentially sit down if you need to. You never know if you're going to need someone to sit based on something that you're telling them. And just avoid those distracting times and places. One kind of lesser known distracting time is someone's lunch break. If you have a coworker you want to speak to, lunch breaks aren't necessarily the best time, because they are using that time for themselves. You can always ask. But don't force conversation on people during their relaxing time. I don't think that's fair. Lastly, be patient. Again, you're probably burning to have this communication, burning. However, some people are not burning to talk to you, so they're not going to make a rush of it. You can absolutely let them know that you'd really like to speak to them right away, but it's not, you can't force that on people. Trying to force someone to communicate with you at your time and your place goes right back to what I was saying before, and you have to know that you're responsible if that conversation were to fail. If you try to force someone to communicate with you when you're ready, that is a failure on your part to be an effective communicator. Work something out with that person. Try to get your communication as fast as you can without applying pressure to them. Applying that pressure is actually the opposite of what you're trying to do with communication. When you are communicating with people, you want it to all be calm. You want it to all be listening. You want it to all, but if someone's feeling rushed or feeling pushed into a conversation that they're not quite ready for, you lose that. You lose the calm, you lose the positive energy. So thank you guys so much for listening. I really, really hope that as you're starting to really take responsibility for your communication, that you remember some of the things I said. And also, please empower yourself with knowledge. If you search verbal communication on Google, or if you search body language, or if you search listening skills, there's just so much information. Communication is a science. It is not something that humans are naturally good at. You can learn to be an effective communicator. You can learn to teach other people to be effective communicators. And in the long run, what's going to happen? You're going to start getting the things that you want. You're going to start having the relationships that you enjoy. And once you kind of feel that start happening, I promise you're going to be addicted to communication just like me. So thank you guys again for listening to me go on and on about the things that I love. I really appreciate Okan for giving me this opportunity to speak with you all. And hopefully I'll be able to speak with you again soon. Thanks a lot.